the theme of this series is to disrupt the certainty that I observe people have around certain topics with the purpose of gaining clarity. This episode is addressing what is mostly absent in the fabric of our machine driven, money centered world. And what we're talking about is moral imagination.
That's the first time I'm hearing that money drives the world. That's the first time I've heard that. But thank you.
I'm here to tune you in.
Thank you for educating me.
We all need a little help, and that's what I'm here for. Um,
I need a lot.
The working definition of this term, moral imagination, is the capacity to generate ethically coherent futures and expand the option set before one tries to optimize and before people begin to build systems and build tools. I want to hear what you think about that. You can speak to AI, which is our intersection here. But in human decision intelligence terms, moral imagination is one example of sapience. It's discernment plus analogical reasoning. In other words, it's the pre-decision engine in one's judgment infrastructure. So if discernment tests a reality and analogical reasoning transfers insight, then moral imagination locates outcomes that are worth scaling.
This is like categorical imperative. This is like Kantian.
I guess I'm presenting it as it should be, but the problem that I'm seeing with society is that this isn't a new term. It's probably a more academic word, but it's useful. And so much of human decision intelligence is finding useful words that are precise and that can expand our thinking, because our thinking is what directs our action. And I don't think moral imagination is being considered in any kind of strong social way. So in context of AI, in context of the fourth industrial revolution, in context of society 5.0, which is what Japan has inspired, all of these human-centered pushes in a machine-centered world, one of the things that we don't have as a society is this use of moral imagination. We're not anticipating long-term harm for mainly humans, but also for living things versus machine things. So that is the topic of discussion. Often what's happening in modernity is people, companies, builders are optimizing the wrong thing efficiently. We've got this, especially as Americans, addiction to efficiency and optimization. But what is it that we're optimizing? And what if we're optimizing the wrong thing? What if we're devoted to efficiency for not the best, most intelligent forms of efficiency? What outcomes are worth us making super fucking efficient, and at what costs?
I mean, that's a lot to work with.
Yeah, you don't need much. But here's to give you more. So, for example, we have a culture where KPIs or performance measurements really eat purpose. Like what's measurable is prioritized over what's meaningful. This is something most all of us have experienced. And then we also inherit pre-baked menus and options and call it choice, right? Imagination isn't resourced. People think that selection is the same as invention, or that's how it works itself out, right? So rather than inventing, we select. And then ethics in general, especially in what we build and in our commerce, shows up after the decision. So it shows up as policy, versus design, which is more purposeful and could be more human-centered. And then, like I mentioned earlier, reflex and speed is rewarded over reflection. And friction is treated as waste rather than a signal. We're dinged for friction rather than really using friction. I mean, not always, right? I don't want to be overly reductive. Some companies and some people really do use friction as a way to iterate and to build. So those are some of the things where moral imagination solves for. Moral imagination anticipates harm and doesn't abstract consequences from real people and communities.
Are you saying that we lack that now?
Yes. That's why I'm introducing the term.
I mean, what do you think about, I don't know, the relative success of, I don't know, progressive politics, the relative success of strikes, recent strikes? Like, do you think that is, I don't know, like, I feel like those movements and even populism in general, right or left wing populism, even right-wing populism being as successful as it is a version of some type of moral imagination, right?
I guess the question mark is, is that those are generally in response to some failure. But moral imagination is about anticipating those things as a way of preventing, or they're built into our systems. And sure, in order to make the future systems different, we have to, get upset and break the existing ones. So protests and these things are a part of the process of a moral imagination where you're imagining some different future based on different values. So yes, but what I'm thinking in terms of, is it actually conditioned in a way that we're taught to think this way as we're building our systems? And I think particularly in the context of AI and machine driven world, in our companies and in our tools and the apps that we build and how we use them. I think that it's a value that particularly younger people have because even that fits in climate change, right? I mean, imagination is about the consequences of our actions now into the future. So it's not that it's not there, but what I think is a problem is it's not super built in as a priority in our thinking. What's prioritized because we have to in the systems that exist is money and speed. Money is time in our culture, which is actually not accurate. I have another episode arguing that speed isn't often efficient. But this idea of moral imagination is a kind of sapience that requires reflection. It requires deconstructing what we are doing now and how that could be different in the future, and what we're doing now, what the consequences of that would be in the future. And it fits perfectly into human decision intelligence because it's a capacity plus skill. It's discernment plus analogical reasoning. It has an anticipatory feature.
It just feels like to me that what you're describing of our culture aligning around money and power, technology, etc., that is a function of the system. It's not like we can like think ourselves out of it. If like space was the final frontier or something like that, maybe you could argue that that's like an imaginative, moral, ethical future. But I feel like in general, the way that our system works is that money is the way that we find value, right? We assign value. So you can't get to a different, I don't know, culture set without having to have to dismantle that system. And I don't think that that system is going to get dismantled, right? I think that it's fairly robust even. It's almost like you'd have to deconstruct the way that the Fed works and the way that the New York Stock Exchange works and all that. And that to me is like futile.
I guess this is what isn't futile in my work. Obviously, yes, it is systemic. Yes, unless our finance and legal structure changes, we're going to be limited by original thinking or ethical thinking. Yet, it's still important in terms of exercising that part of our human ability and capacity. Just because we're up against those systematic obstacles doesn't mean that we stop exercising this part of our human ability, which is to consider these things, to bring it inside our judgment. And the only way that we can change these systems is if there's enough people who are like, you know what, I'm doing it differently. And then eventually the finance and law follows, which we've seen this happen before.
Where?
Right now, the new mayor of of New York, how much new thinking is required for enough people to say yes, 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 for now at least the systems that are more possible than they were last month to change. How much he's going to actually be able to change, we don't know. But more possible than ever before. And it was because people's minds changed, people's beliefs and values became clear, and they were able to put action behind that. Is a way of disrupting the current system. It fundamentally is. I mean, this is very much against the current American systems. And yet it is the thing that could create change because the system is being disrupted and maybe even broken in a good way. So I think we do see these. I mean, that's how any big changes occur.
I think there's truth to that. I also think like, look, like people are fed up with corrupt politicians, and there's an huge economic element. I guess I don't think Mamdani would have made it if he was up against stronger, moderate competition that wasn't as corrupt or had so much baggage as Cuomo did and Eric Adams. And I also think that Mamdani it was just a confluence of things that were mainly economic. And he rightly leaned into economic solutions that were, in theory, interesting for the populace. But yeah, I just don't know that it's a more imagination issue for him necessarily as much as an economic issue, or maybe such that the economic issue paved way for him to be the morally imaginative candidate for now.
Moral imagination doesn't kill the economic drive. At the end of the day, every bad decision costs us something. All of these decisions that lack moral imagination will end up costing us not just people's lives, but our health, especially with climate change. For a long time, people are like, oh, climate change doesn't affect our bottom dollar until it does. So, moral imagination fundamentally is not outside of economic concerns, it's within it.
Do you think that people do the right thing because it's the right thing to do? Or do you think that people do the right thing because it's like societal?
I think both. I think that our conditioning is way stronger. And this is so much of what human decision intelligence is about, is that when we're fatigued and we have anxiety, humans become less reflective, less contemplative, and we make worse decisions. Conditioning is huge. And then consequence of not making good decisions because we're stressed out and whatever just creates a vicious cycle that is fundamentally self-sabotaging. That is the whole discussion of human decision intelligence, is exactly what you said, is parsing down what is conditioned, what is just laziness, where do our beliefs come from? Can we challenge those beliefs and values, or at minimum reorganize them? So we still have them. We're changing the priority list because we haven't examined them closely enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, what about in terms of AI right now? Like, you are at the forefront of this discussion and how our tools are being built and how the tools are often built faster than the ethics behind them. It's a complicated question most people are interested in. I kind of get bored of this same problem because I understand it at such a deep level, but also it's a big problem.
What do you think the problem is?
Well, it's just what I said, is that our tools are built faster than stop gaps that are preventing harm. And it's always been that way with innovation, right? You and I come from innovation, and this is an age old problem where
Yeah.
we build things faster than we can, create guardrails. And guardrails are important. Creating and building is important. How does any innovation in the history or the present actually make that balance work? It usually doesn't work. It usually creates more harm until worse things happen, and then guardrails are forced. Even with a car, when did we actually add seat belts? I don't even know, but not for a long time. So just as a metaphor, but it still doesn't deny the actual problem. Also, when it's whatever the more powerful tool is, like nuclear plant, that has the potential harm, where from the get-go, we have guardrails because we understand the danger from the beginning. So my question is, hey, if we can understand the danger of our innovation from the beginning, we know we could actually do both because we have done both with that example of nuclear power. So I think that we can do it now, and I just think that it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for builders, and obviously our systems reward speed of building versus ethical guardrails. So that's what the developers are going to do. They're going to build the tool and not the ethical guardrails, because that's not what's being rewarded. So we know this problem, right? How do we solve it? I don't know. I mean, billionaire could just pay these same developers to create ethical guardrails.
Well, it's a definitely a double-edged sword. I mean, I think we often think forwards about what is the harm going to be and not backwards about what the harms currently are. And so we probably don't think about how many people need therapy or are lonely, and how AI potentially solves that problem. And maybe the problem also is because our society is not equipped to deal with the loneliness that it created, that we kind of went fast forwards into this current world that we're living in. But that's, to me, has always been the nature of human society. I don't agree with people who kind of look backwards at society and think, oh, there was a time when humans were at peace, or there was a time when humans were like more tribal and therefore we were like at one with nature. I just don't think that ever was true, actually. Inevitably, humans were going to reproduce more and cause more people to be on Earth, and therefore more complex cities and countries and states and or empires, and that was going to cause us to have to innovate to create infrastructure to deal with a more complex society that we created, right? It's like you have found good water for your people, therefore more people come there, therefore you reproduce more, therefore you need to do something to account for the water. Now you don't have enough water because a lot of people came here. Now you have to create all sorts of, like that to me is just is what happens when things go well, is that more people arrive and you have to create more complex system. And we now live in a society that has 8 billion, almost 9 billion people or whatever. And we are buckling under the pressure of creating the society that we've created. And here now we have this AI thing that it comes in the form of drones and robotics and LLMs and image to video models. And we're like, oh my gosh, okay, so what can we do with this? It's going to cause all sorts of problems. And to your point, I think all the tools always are double-edged swords in a lot of ways. Like nuclear bombs can kill hundreds of thousands to millions of people. Nuclear power plants can power an entire country, right? And so does AI do the same thing? Yes, I think when we look at therapy, we look at the people relying now on AI to solve interpersonal problems. There's also going to simultaneously be the collateral damage of people who, commit suicide or break up or whatever. And I think the AI people are trying to solve for that problem from every angle. Right? So I simultaneously don't know that we can solve a lot of the problems in society that we want to solve without AI. And I think that begs the same question where you solve one set of problems and you get another set of problems. It's not just a contradiction, it is what happens with scale. Like when I make something easier, it's not the case that people use it less. It's the case that people use it more. And so you
Mm.
are now creating a different problem. The best example is traffic. It's like when I create more highways, I'm not actually solving traffic. I'm actually potentially causing more traffic because now more people are using those highways. And so more people buy cars. And then you just have this compounding problem. So AI probably is going to do the same exact thing in different exponential levels. It's a weird world that we're proceeding into. But I also like look around, I was just in New York and, there are so many problems in New York that if you were an outsider, you would probably see immediately. But if you are a New Yorker, you probably see certain problems, which is why you vote for Mamdani or why you vote for different people and why you want change to happen here and there. But you also are probably used to a lot of things that you just accept as part of what is considered to be New York, which is why New Yorkers also have this reputation of, New Yorkers don't give a fuck. That's because they've learned to just be like, whatever, move on. And I think we all do that to some extent and don't recognize the amount of problems that we have in our society that something like AI could solve.
Or something like human decision intelligence could solve, which is exactly right. I feel like the call to what you're saying, Min, is that we're in an age where we no longer can be binary or super reductive. That we now, as a society and as individuals, need to be able to do more than one thing at a time. We need to be able to build and protect at the same time. We need to be able to have all of this wonderful development and innovation and also have high ethic standards and a focus and a priority that is not just one priority. And I think the history of humanity, we have had singular priorities or more binary existences. And I think now is the time where we're going to have to advance and expand to do more than one thing at the same time with equal priority. And that's why moral imagination matters to me. It's not that I don't understand the systems that are in place and not that I don't understand the benefits of all of our machines and technology. I do. I just think that there is harm. And I don't think that we as a society and where we're at right now, that we should be constantly playing catch up. I think we gotta do things at the same time now. And we can. We just have to get the right people in place and we have to exercise those muscles.
What does that mean to you?
You sound like a
Like,
therapist. Well, what it means is changing our priorities and exercising the muscles of, in this case, moral imagination, but it's many things. So it would be like inside our systems and inside our thinking, we're creating greater option breadth. We're adding options around dignity, lowering harm, for example. And then we're having more resiliency checks, like how reversible are our defaults? How can we create, real easy opt-outs and clear trade-offs, right, that are more centered around human systems? How can we scan for positive deviance where we're sourcing options from outlier human practices that are more human affirming? And then how can we have, build the muscle of ethical anticipation, which is adding questions. How could this harm real people? And then what can we do better now, better than now? What does this enable in the future beyond money and, and productivity based? How can we actually include the human question? And then there's different ways we can measure that. And that's what human decision intelligence is about, is how can we actually measure that, which I have ideas of how we could do that. But it's more additive than subtractive, but that addition creates a burden on humans, which I do think is the future. The people that have the capacity to do this kind of ethical work, to do this kind of sapience work around judgment, metacognition and analogical reasoning, xenopathy versus empathy, all of these things that are fundamentally increasing our sapience. That's where I think the humans are going to be more essential. Those humans who are building their capacities now and building these kind of skill sets, because they're going to be more and more necessary.
What do you mean by sapience?
So sapience is judgment, discernment, intuition. So sapience is a human way of analyzing data, because it's not raw and it's not linear and it's not literal. And only so far humans can do that. Maybe AI will eventually be able to do that. But right now, these places of discernment, judgment require flesh. A lot of the data that we gather with our bodies, it's non-literal. This is what moral imagination is. Moral imagination, it's anticipatory and looking back. And then it requires a certain ability of comparisons that aren't just raw data. The human factor has to be evaluated, which is just more complex. Human decision intelligence is devoted to this area of sapience. How can we amplify sapience in a machine-driven world so that we're not left behind? And if we're outsourcing our judgment, which is often the case, we're missing shit, because even if we just consider smell and taste certain realities around physics of energy exchange, right? That data isn't nothing. It adds up to high levels of intelligence. The question mark here is, how can we dig into these things by noticing what's missing and anticipating what's going to become increasingly more important into the future? And then also how to not fucking atrophy. Like, are we all just going to become less and less physical creatures to where we're losing our animal human ability because we're literally outsourcing everything to a machine?
Think so?
I don't think so either. I mean, I just don't know very many people who are really digging into the human intelligence part, which we are losing with all the evidence that we know. The anxiety levels and our isolation issues, and so much of the human ability to have intimacy and relationship require skills and capacity that are going away. So then we're less fulfilled because we need each other. If we lose our ability to relate and create intimacy, here we go. So I do think these are all the areas of sapience. And so how does that come back to moral imagination? I think it's just a focus that needs to be added into our systems and structures of thinking, and then also our systems and structures of operating. But it doesn't seem like you're a big fan.
I mean, I don't know what the future looks like. I think it's hard to tell. I think humanity is going to have to level up in response to machine intelligence. And I think machines will increasingly solve problems that we previously thought were both big and small. I mean, it's interesting because I'm in the creative AI universe, and that's where I am increasingly able to just produce any type of media that I want. Right now, what does that mean once everybody can do that? What does that mean for me to be able to have something differentiated in terms of story or thought or whatever? And I would imagine that paradigm is going to come for everybody. I think a lot of problems just don't get solved right now just because we are stuck in how we do things. And then AI is going to break down a lot of barriers and a lot of gates and a lot of walls because it's going to make things so easy to do. And then it's going to call into question, like, what is your value in a world where a lot of little problems are just solved? Back to New York City, it's like, can I imagine a world, maybe not near, but can I imagine a world in which there are just robots everywhere on the streets of New York City cleaning the trash, right? Which is a real problem, but it's also not a real problem, but it is a real problem, right? There are rats everywhere, but it's not a real problem because New York City has learned to live with those things. But imagine the world where there's no trash around, because the robots have solved that problem.
That is actually an example of moral imagination, because what are the real life costs to that we've adapted to that aren't a healthy adaption. We could probably list those out. But that is a kind of a tangible place of moral imagination, and especially in relationship to our tools. Like, I love that. Like, yes, but I think we need to be thinking about that more immediately before we work on ways that companies can make a fuck ton of money. I'm not anti making money. I think that's great, but not where it's the top priority in most all contexts of our business and commerce. That's the problem, not the fact that we need to make money. It's where we start.
But moral imagination, it feels to me like it's something that is a middle class thing. Is it an educated elite problem?
If you say that, then that means education is a middle class thing, because all of this, or getting in the gym, maybe that's only available to people who aren't only trying to survive. But the majority of my conversations are about developing the future minds. So it would be young people and those who are leading the future now. Those who are leading the future need to get more expansive. And then the ones who are the future need to be getting in the gym so that there's not atrophy or obesity, metaphorically. Otherwise, that's not going to work.
Yeah. But there's an element of you have to try at it to that, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work.
So much of my work is trying to inspire people to see that the benefits are greater than the cost. Very few people want to go and have a ton of fun exercising. I mean, there are some, but very few. But the benefits so outweigh the initial costs of it. And sometimes we just don't see the cost. But when we really connect to the cost, it's like, well, there's no other option, because otherwise I'm just going to sabotage everything that I actually want, because what I want isn't possible without a strong body. I can't have great sex. I can't be quick in my mind. I can't have great relationships. I can't fucking, walk the half a mile and enjoy the ocean. If I have no health and if I have no mental capacity or skill, then my anxiety takes over and I'm debilitated in the worst ways, which is literally what we're seeing now in society. And so what's the antidote? And this is what I'm offering as an antidote. There's no one thing, but there is a framework of many things that create a collective antidote.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
You don't seem inspired.
I mean, not something that I think about much, to be honest. I think that's why recycling is an interesting issue. There are a select few people that I know who recycle because they think it's the right thing to do. Most people recycle because they got a blue bin from the city, right? Or because there's a blue bin at the airport.
What I am proposing is that this kind of automated thinking and automated actions become less automated, even though certain algorithms and certain automation works. I'm not saying eliminate everything that's automated, but not everything should be automated. And yet we're being conditioned as a society and as individuals to be only automated. And that is the issue that I'm addressing. Our machines are conditioning us to become like machines. The Industrial Revolution started that, right? Now in our society, we're expected, even as workers, to work like machines, not like humans. So this is still a thing, which is fine. Certain automation for certain things are optimal. But what this discussion is about is, hey, let's not be automated thinkers. Well, how do we do that when we're being more and more conditioned, not less and less? And that is the question of moral imagination, because moral imagination is fundamentally a place of reflection, a place of future looking and past looking, where we're making comparisons and we're creating hypothesis and we're working with the material of consequences and harm. It's something that we must exercise.
I agree that we must. The question is, will we?
Well, that's always the question. I say this right up front with my work. I'm not trying to reduce your cognitive load here. And people have given me that feedback. People want to be handheld or spoon-fed information. And the only ones who really can engage my conversations consistently are either young people because they're really tuned in, or intellectuals because they like thinking. But those are the people who will probably rule the future, because we're gonna need to keep thinking, people. Otherwise, you're letting the machines automate your entire existence. That's fine, I suppose, if you're choosing that. But I do think there are consequences to that in terms of happiness, fulfillment. The call is, hey, let's learn to enjoy thinking, or at least see the benefit of it, like getting in the gym.
I hear you.
All right.
That's a good note to end on. An inspiring Nicole,